What happens when you have multiple inputs or multiple cost drivers in a single department? Well, generally organizations tend to departmentalize based upon a function or a specialization. So these different units that you have within the organization derive costs. They incur costs when they integrate the cost directly in their processes, but they also incur indirect costs, overhead costs. And when you're going to assign these costs to the unit, you have to come up with a means or method of doing so. So what you're basically doing is you're looking for a cost driver. And in this case, we're saying the word input, but you're saying any of these inputs could be a cost driver that is used as a metric to assign some portion of the overall organization's overhead to that department. Now, how do you do that? Well, once you've identified a cost driver, and that could be anything from a certain type of activity, a certain amount of resources used, the number of people, the number of output from the organization, that type of thing. So you would identify first the activity driver, then you would identify all of the overhead costs that could somehow be related to it. So you might have to segment out or pull out those costs that could be somehow related to that department. And then once you've identified the different cost drivers, you could somehow allocate a certain percentage that says that this activity, there's twice as much of this activity as this other activity and twice as much as this other activity. So you would then divide these costs by each of these activities to make certain you allocated a specific portion of the total overhead cost to these different activities, and you could come up with an individual unit cost. So the rate you would come up with would be total overhead cost divided by total level of activity, and then you could subdivide it by the individual activities. And you could use this to assess or assign the cost to the individual departments. So basically what you're saying here is you have multiple sources of cost that you're allocating to the individual departments based upon some activity driver that you've identified as the metric or the input, and the rate, used it to derive the rate for assigning the cost to the department.